Hello again. One of the things which I find really puzzling is the way in which sensible views about health have become muddled up in many people's minds with social responsibility and moral duties. Smoking, for instance, was always a personal choice, but it's now seen as a wicked activity likely to impose a burden upon the National Health Service and also injure the health of anybody sitting in the vicinity of the smoker. The same thing has happened, of course, with alcohol and food. I'm reminded of the American political thinker Mencken, whom I have quoted before on here. He defined Puritanism as the haunting fear that someone somewhere may be happy. Oddly enough, the London Underground system serves as a microcosm of enlightened modern views on health and behaviour. At one time, of course, you could smoke like a chimney on the tube and nobody cared all that much. Anybody remember when there were cigarette machines all over the place? Then came fears about passive smoking and all that was swept away. One could no longer have a smoke on the train in the morning, which was a bit annoying for those of us who did smoke. This spread to pubs, of course, and the weird situation arose whereby you couldn't even go to the pub for a drink and sit there with a cigarette. No wonder all the pubs started to close down after that. Remember all those self-righteous and sanctimonious types who said they didn't go to the pub because of all the stale smoke they had to breathe in? This was all nonsense. They just didn't like the idea of people sitting in a pub with a pint of beer in one hand and a fag in the other. This brings us back to the underground because the same attitude led to the demise of licensed premises on the tube. Believe it or not, in the 1970s there were no fewer than 30 buffets and bars on the London Underground where you could get a drink, often outside normal pub opening hours, which was handy. These ranged from a pub called the Hole in the Wall, which was actually on the platform at Sloane Square Station until it closed in 1985, to the cafe on the platform at Stratford Station, where you could either buy a cheese sandwich or have a quick half on the way home from work. The healthy eating and drinking brigade became increasingly anxious about the idea of commuters drinking alcohol on the tube. Terrible idea, sure to create a generation of problem drinkers. People might get drunk and fall under trains. Who knows what could happen? The result was that all those licensed premises found that their applications for renewal of their licences were refused. Today, there's nowhere on the tube where you can get a drink. In 2008, in fact, London Mayor Boris Johnson made it illegal to drink alcohol at all on the tube. Having forbidden tobacco and alcohol on the Underground, the Puritans cast their eye around for something else which people might be doing during their journeys to give them pleasure. Horrors! They realised that every platform had a machine on it for selling bars of chocolate. Just think of the tooth decay, the obesity, the terrible self-indulgence of buying a bar of chocolate and then eating the whole thing by yourself while you're on the train. So it was that the decision was made that all machines selling sweets had to be removed from the Underground system. When did you last see a chocolate machine on the platform? You see, most of us choose to eat chocolate or not, have a drink of beer or smoke a cigarette if we feel like it. For normal people, this is a strictly personal choice. It only concerns us. It takes a special kind of personality to decide that if I don't want to eat a bar of chocolate, then nobody else should be given the opportunity to do so. I happen to be a total abstainer as far as alcohol is concerned, but I have not the slightest desire to prevent other people from opening a bottle of wine if they feel like it. I couldn't care less if others want to drink. Why should I? Some viewers might notice there's a trend lately to bring the NHS into discussions about alcohol, obesity or vaccines. This is an attempt to discourage people from thinking in terms of personal choices and individual decisions. Just think how many fat people the NHS has to look after. Are you sure you want to add to the burden by having another bar of chocolate? What happens if your liver packs up because you can't control your craving for a glass of whiskey? It's the NHS that will have to pick up the pieces. Very selfish to put any extra pressure on them. What a joyless society we are becoming, counting calories, measuring our alcohol intake in units rather than pints or half pints, forbidding people to smoke, even in the open air, in case they drop a cigarette end somewhere. It is of course possible to extend our lives and youth greatly by adopting crank diets and a peculiar way of life. Humans, like mice and other mammals, can live longer and stay looking younger if they're kept on the very edge of starvation all the time. I saw an interview with a man who had lived like this since he was a teenager. Although in his 50s, he looked like somebody of 30. The downside was that he said that he always felt hungry and cold. After spending 30 years like that. For myself, I don't see much point in life if we're going to avoid doing anything which might be injurious to our health. The new puritans who seem determined to stop us all doing anything which is enjoyable and yet might cause some long-term harm are, in my opinion, an absolute scourge. Remember the survey a few weeks back in which it came to light that a fifth of the people asked wanted to see all nightclubs closed down permanently? This is the increasingly common attitude against which we must fight, that anything which people enjoy and might not be good for them should be suppressed for their own sake.